Mars, you get to introduce yourself first.
Hi everyone, I'm Mars. I work at QuantSite as a software developer and designer, and I am working with Isabela to do this workshop.
Yes, and I am the aforementioned Isabella. I am formerly a UX UI designer, but I work a lot on open source projects, mostly through QuantSite Labs. It's Mars and I do work together. And so that can mean a lot of different things there because every project needs really different kind of work. We both care a lot about accessibility too, so that's why we're here to talk about that some today. And we're really trying to bring accessibility into open source spaces because a lot of these are critical pieces of software used across all kinds of domains, right? All kinds of industries. And it's missing this because it really hasn't been a priority in most communities thus far. So we work together a lot trying to bring that to places that we are in. So yeah, that's awesome. I actually am going to start by prompting a question that you can just answer in the chat. Do we have anyone who's contributed to open source here before? I should probably define that maybe a little bit. But yeah, simple yes or no would be good, just so I know. Okay. Seeing some no's, some yeses. Awesome. Okay. That's fantastic. I just wanted to know so we don't get too ahead of ourselves and make this confusing. Right. So I don't even know how I would define open source now that I have to. Do you do you have a good answer, Mars? It's public code.
It's software that is made more available, often free, and it's made by the people who want it and shared by people who want to access it. That was
Right.
very on the fly.
Yeah, no, sorry to ask you, but I just was like, oh, I should define this, and then realized I did not have any idea what I was going to say. So that's why we're teaming up for this. But yeah, okay, that's wonderful that we're seeing a mix of stuff. So there are a lot of different communities for open source software out there. Both Mars and I spend a lot of time on scientific Python communities, right? And that's Inessa as well, spending time in NumPy, which is how we've met. And that's why we're here today, because that's Mars spends a lot of time in NumPy as well. And yeah, so we are trying to get that community in particular, right? These are things used in education and school. So accessibility, while important everywhere, becomes really critical. And I'm talking about accessibility in the sense of making things usable for people with disabilities, not just accessible in the sense that it's like more open to people. While that's also important, that's more what we're going to talk about today. And on top of that, we're actually going to be focused on one type of accessibility today because that's a huge topic and we don't want to overload you. So today we're going to be talking about alt text or image descriptions in documentation for these projects, because that's something that seems like it's going to be really simple and sometimes it's super fascinating to think about, but we found it's a really good entry point for getting people to start thinking about accessibility because it's not as unfamiliar as some other things, right? So I actually won't be asking you to flex any Python skills today, but we, I think, are still going to have a great time looking at stuff. And we'll walk through the PR that we're working on a little bit later because Mars is going to first explain more about alt text. Yay! Yeah. Unless I missed anything.
I'm going to share my screen because I have a presentation here. All right. Cool. Oh, that's not the one. There we go. Okay, so let me just close this here. Okay, so hi everyone. As you signed up for, this is a workshop for writing alt text for scientific diagrams, and this one specifically scikit-learn. So welcome everyone from Southwest Florida, Miami, rest of the United States. So you might see to the left is a pretty graph, but that's not the important graph. This one is important, but that's only because it looks like Pac-Man. Doesn't have anything to do with workshop, it's just cool. But in this workshop, you will be initiated into a highly trained task force known as the alt text task force. And by the end of this workshop, we will have the skills to better the open source world and beyond. So we can do a bit of like a thought exercise, but you don't need it. It doesn't need to be imaginary. In fact, we have some examples right here. So assuming that we are all sighted and that we can see without major problems, we can go on the internet and there's a lot of images there. However, sometimes, if you have a spotty connection, images don't fully load. And say you were at breadrecipes.com. And the next step was to shape your dough like this. But you can't see the image. You don't know what this is. And there's no alt text either. So you don't have any idea what the next steps would be. However, if there was alt text, you could still access that and there will be a description. So in this case, like bread dough created by twirling the dough into the shape. And by this description, you already have a much clearer idea of what to do next. So, and then you can imagine, oh, images are loaded. Now you have all the information. However, not everyone sees the same way. There are a range of visual disabilities. And like Isabel mentioned, there's a lot of different ones, but we're focusing on visual ones today. So you could be situationally disabled where you don't have your glasses. Maybe an older person with glaucoma or cataracts or blindness as well. So when you have cataracts or you don't have your glasses, the screen reader, which is a type of assisted technology, can read out the alt text so the person can hear, and maybe with combining the alt text they hear and the image, they are able to again get the whole picture, have more information. This is another example with glaucoma. And again, the screen reader is helping them understand more. And then with like more blindness, the screen reader might be used to navigate the entire web page. But again, the information is still accessible. So as a sighted person with alt text, you still get your experience. And in fact, alt text benefits everyone. So whether you're experiencing the internet like this, or like this, or like this, or like this, everyone benefits from having accessible images and an accessible internet. So our example with bread is pretty funny, pretty lighthearted, but that is actually an extension that everyone has the right to access information and access the internet. So it could be accessing school, it could be accessing the library, it could be, in the internet, and, as we've seen in the past year, e-learning. And in the same way, everyone should have the right to access information. They also have the right to create and add to the world. So I'm sure many of you have heard of Helen Keller, and by being able to access information with Braille, she's able to add back into the world of her experiences. So we better understand what she's gone through and how we can improve the lives of people with different types of disabilities. There's, and there's even more, extensions to that where you also have people with visual disabilities creating architecture, the physical environment, so that they can navigate the streets as any of us would. And in fact, the next frontier is digital architecture. And in the same way, there are like so many different possibilities, but that all starts from being able to access this information. So going back to open source specifically, open source projects pride themselves for being free and available, accessible. But being available doesn't necessarily mean accessible if users cannot actually access the information or documentation fully. So by making open source more accessible, we are also purposely including disabled people in the conversation. So just like how we are deliberately welcoming marginalized groups, such as with PyLadies, we're also bringing contributions from a diverse group, making for stronger open source. And in that way, you could think of like a Pokemon team. When you have a diverse group, you're able to cover more and do more. So now we're going to go back a bit to actually writing alt text. So as you can see from the bread example, it is like, okay, just talk about the shapes, focus on identifiable objects. So in this case, it's also pretty straightforward. where it's there's some pencils, coffee, mug, things like that. However, this kind of advice falls apart because in a graph, what are the identifiable objects? Is it the peak of this graph? Is it that it goes up and down? Is it that the X and Y axis? Is it a matter of like the variance? Is that too much information? So in this example with a histogram, is it enough to say that this is a histogram, a bell-shaped histogram? A bell-shaped histogram is peaks in the center, the number of bins. And what if you don't even know that much about this math or science or how this was created with NumPy? Then do you say it's a graph that goes up and down? It stops at 4.0, wibbly wobbly, timey-wimey. Again, it's a lot of information. So how do we distill that into something that people can understand? So thankfully, there are a lot of examples from this resource known as the Diagram Center. And we'll start by looking at examples that are starting from like easy and straightforward to something closer to what we're doing today. So with photographs, identifiable objects, modern day downtown Louisville, Kentucky. Okay. Then as we go into graphs such as Venn diagrams, you can see how the alt text talks about the overall shapes, the labels, and the numbers. So just by this alt text alone, you can already get an idea of what is this being described. And now we're finally getting to something more complicated. So the Diagram Center doesn't have an example for histograms specifically, but we can still learn a lot from what they have to say about bar graphs. The general guidelines are these 3 points: that you identify the graph type, explain the data on the X and Y axis, and summarize the overall trend. It is not necessary to describe visual attributes of the graph, such as the colors, unless there's explicit need for it, such as in exam. So the example you can see has those 3 guidelines of a double bar graph, so identifying graph type, corn and soybean crops from 1959 to 1982, and that both crops increase steadily. However, we'll be modifying some of the guidelines for this workshop. And by the way, the slides and the examples from the Diagram Center will be in our agenda and our PR. So for this workshop, it's okay to go beyond 120 characters. The guidelines are to keep it within 120 characters, which is for brevity. But it takes a lot of practice to be detailed, but also succinct in less space than a Twitter tweet. So putting any alt text is better than no alt text. The Diagram Center also recommends converting data points to tables. And this can be really useful if, especially in exam, if you want the person to really dig into each data point and compare like line by line, bar by bar. However, in the interest of time and the context of our workshop, we will not be doing that, but that's also a helpful way of understanding how people can access this information. So another guideline is to look at the surrounding context to help you. So again, this is a histogram made with NumPy. So we can actually go to the web page to see the full context. So this is taken from the website, and this was not written by me, but I was able to extract the relevant points. So thank you, the contributor that put in these very helpful code comments. So taking these important points, I'm able to, have like a short summary that this is a normalized histogram that peaks at 2.8. So that is like, just from that alt text, someone can understand what the graph is like. And if you were able to add more, which you certainly can, then as you add in like the variance, the mean, the bins, and bell shape, it provides like a fuller picture of what is there. And this is the total alt text. It is short, succinct, but again, it's fine if yours is not as long or as detailed as this. So in summary, the guidelines for writing alt text for scientific diagrams is to identify the graph type, explain the data on the X and Y axis, summarize the overall trend, and look at the surrounding context and information to help you identify what to write about. And it is totally okay right now to go beyond 120 characters because some alt text is better than no alt text. So congratulations, you've successfully started your initiation into the alt text task force. Everyone benefits from alt text, and with these newfound skills, you can benefit the open source world and beyond. Welcome to the alt text task force.
Thank you so much, Mars. That was always wonderful to see. And something you will hear us say a lot, just to reiterate one point Mars said about the context, you will hear that as being the answer to most questions that we have is like, okay, well, how specific should I be here? How do I know what's important? And it's really important to look what's around it. But before we go any further, I'd like to ask people if they have any questions. I know that was a lot to think about probably at once. And you can leave them in chat or you can speak, sorry.
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I have a project where we have figures with source codes from a book, and we provide the figures captions as text. But I recognize that these are not really good alt text. So do you think as the first approach, it's better to put these in the alt text or not have alt text at all? So in the rendered HTML, it's already the captions are already there for the figures, just not in the alt text field.
Mars, do you have things you want to say, or if not, I can.
You can go first and I'll add on if I have anything.
Okay. One thing I will say, part of the reason that we like to talk about, that we like to go and speak to people about this is there's not a single set of standards. So what you're asking is a really good question, and I've seen people do it a lot of different ways. So if you have a caption, then it's going to be read, so there is information. And it kind of depends if you think that it's conveying the same kind of info is what my litmus test has been. So if the caption, for example, you're talking about graphs, so it may be the same. I've heard, you know, in a history textbook, right? The alt text for like a portrait of a US president is probably just the name of like whatever portrait that is, right? While the caption might be like, this is a painting of this person by so-and-so artist, right? And that those are actually different pieces of information. So I think what I would do is see, do I think this caption has the same information as this would have in the actual figure above? If it does, then I think that the caption can work fine. If you think that there's different information that those are giving, then it may be worth having alt text, if that was a helpful answer.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, no, and books are, I wish there were easy answers for some of these things, and I have yet to find them. So I appreciate you giving the example.
I kind of have both, but it doesn't, right. I think none of them goes into the detail, and that's that it's that kind of graph and picks here and or there. It's
right.
Yeah, as in the scientific paper, it just talks about that it's a Gaussian distribution, and then there are a lot of assumptions in there already. So yeah, I don't know.
Oh, and we're going to get practice with this today, so I'm excited to see what you write. I saw did I see a raised hand? Did I make that up? I don't see it anymore. Linda, maybe? No? No. Okay.
I lowered.
Okay. Well, thanks. That's fine. If there is nothing else immediately, though I'll give you a few seconds of silence, I'm going to link to our full agenda. And, no, actually, I'm just going to link to the PR, even though we're going to have to walk you through this. Mars, did you want to walk through the PR, or did you want me to?
You could, but you could also make use of the guide for GitHub suggestions.
That's what I was thinking, yeah. So, okay, so what I'm linking here is the place that we're going to be working collaboratively, right? I said we were going to get some practice on what Mars just showed us, and we are. We have something pre-prepared. So if you haven't seen this before, let me open and screen share actually. Okay, here it is. I am sharing. Here it is. Thank you. Are you seeing a website? Okay, awesome. So this, if you haven't seen it before, is GitHub. It has a lot of uses, but for our purposes today, this is the place that a lot of open source projects are hosted. And we are looking at a PR or pull request, which is what you do when you're trying to contribute. You say, oh, I'd like to give you this thing. I'd like to request that you pull it into your source code, right? It took me forever to figure out the direction, like push or pull. So don't worry about that right now if that's unfamiliar. But this is what we're going to be doing so that we are going to create a PR together on not the official version of the project, on my version of it, so that we can make it nice and neat, and then we will contribute it right as a group after this workshop. And yeah, and that's what we're going to do. So we're contributing to Scikit-Learn today because we are just looking for projects with documentation without alt text, and we found them because we know a lot of people in the ecosystem. So this is what it looks like. I have a little blurb at the top so that it hopefully can help you get your bearings if you need to. But what we're going to do is I have made changes to a bunch of files where I've marked where there needs to be alt text. And these are all links so that you can see where they are. We don't have to fill them all out today. Don't panic. We just want to make sure we had enough examples that people could see. So right, if you see the files changed, all I've done so far is add, this is an RST, an alt attribute, and what you're going to do is add it after. So showing this as an example, I haven't looked at this, so I'm just going to make a completely worthless example. If you are able to click and to see this plus sign, you're going to have a GitHub account. I think we wrote that when we made this event, but in case that got lost in translation somewhere, and that's like a free thing. You're going to click on that plus sign to add a comment, and you want to use the suggestion button because that's easy. And I was like, okay, because that's easy for us to review is what I was trying to. This is an example. This is horrible. You don't need to write like this. I don't know what it is. And then if you click add a single comment, it's going to have it. And the reason the suggestions are nice, it's easy for us to review. And then I can commit it directly, giving credit to you. Committing meaning that I will accept your changes. And then if it was someone else and not me that typed this, like if Mars did, you'd go back and see, now you're an author on this PR. So yay, that's basically the workflow we're going to go.
colon in front of it, or?
Yeah, but we can fix that after. That's what the RST needs to know, that this is alt text and not just text.
Okay,
If you want to edit that, you can. If not, I can also add it after.
okay, I can probably edit it quickly, I think. Let me
Awesome.
try. Let's see. Colon, colon.
I think it's those 3 dots where they're.
Oh, do I need 3 spaces in front of it?
I think that's the indent probably. I think if you just do the suggestion and type after instead of having to delete it, it should be fine. I don't write a lot of RST either, so.
Okay,
Don't.
you know what I'll do? I think I
Hey,
can put 3 spaces in
I think
front
you
of
did it. Yeah,
I just
awesome.
put 3 spaces. There we go.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
Okay.
So everyone can see what I'm looking for. There are a few things that we're going to check, though most of this we're pretty open to having any alt text. It's awesome. There's punctuation, right? Screen readers do use punctuation to know when to pause. So that's awesome that you have punctuation and capitalization in this. So yeah, this isn't too long and it gives more context than before.
Yeah, I think I should make square plural though. It's because I wrote the darkest 5 square, but it should be the darkest 5 squares.
Sure, you can keep editing it as much as you want.
Okay.
I was just here to show, so if I commit this, right, I won't, because it looks like you want to edit it. What you're going to see, oh my gosh, why does it keep popping up? Is that then we're all working together. So that's what I would like to invite you all now to do, is that I can stop sharing and we can group up and say like, I want to work on this one. And Mars and I are here to consult you. That's what we're here to do. Does that sound good to everyone? Regardless, it's the plan, but I am flexible if something seems wrong. Awesome.